Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. The Leagues of Votann are adding their third character this patch. Ammuk is the Memnyr Strategist and begins to tie the faction together. Truthfully, at least based on my view and engagement metrics, the first two Leagues of Votann characters haven't really blown people away, so hopefully Ammuk is a move in the right direction. If you're here for a 15-second summary, Ammuk is a mechanical summoner and buffer. He adds an Ironkin Steeljack as a mechanical summon through his active ability. His passive gives Leagues of Votann and mechanical units a conditional buff to their damage plus an additional hit to units with the Votann trait. He is likely to be a raid mode focused character, where his buff works well in the mechanical team, but also likely to be a key buffer for how the Votann fight alongside one another. He's likely to be a reasonable unit for the Mech raid team, but not a meta piece at the moment. Thanks as always to my Patreons and YouTube members for their support. Ammuk is a rare unlock via 2-week hero release event that starts on March 22nd. As usual, Snowprint's art team have done an incredible job with the model and animations. He has two traits, mechanical and the Leagues of Votann Faction trait, prioritized efficiency. His stats are on screen at Diamond 3, and like the other Votann, Ammuk has a movement speed of 2. Like the other Votann, he can only equip a knife and has the Imperial Grenade as a crit booster. Tawan, Tacticus Ambassador and friend, has helpfully done some analytics to help me create this radar chart for stats. Ammuk is on the slightly tankier side, with health and armor on the 61st and 70th centiles respectively. His damage is awful, but that reflects his role as a buffer, which we'll come to shortly. His active ability is called Ironkin Steeljack, and it literally summons an Ironkin Steeljack that immediately makes an attack but can't move straight away. You'll be able to see the profile of the summon on screen. It also has a movement of 2, like the other Votann, and has a physical melee and energy ranged attack. It has an ability called Purge Response, which lets the unit go into Overwatch if it ends its turn next to a friendly Votann character. It also has a ton of traits. We've seen them all before, but I want to draw your attention to Prioritized Efficiency, which is the faction trait but given to this summon. His passive is wordy, but makes sense when I take you through some gameplay later. In essence, all enemies within 2 hexes are affected by this predictive guidance debuff. If the enemy did not move on its last turn, then Votann and Mechs do more melee damage against it. If the enemy did move, then Votann and Mechs do more ranged damage against it. There's also a line of text where the Votann gain an additional hit. The keen-eyed among you will notice that the numbers here for the passive are identical to Eldyron's Doom. Things make more sense when we look at the abilities in action. The active summons the Steeljack and the model looks pretty cool. In this clip here, you can see how after we summon the Steeljack, it immediately makes an attack and then goes into Overwatch mode, courtesy of the passive ability, Purge Response. The Steeljack also has the faction trait, and because there are no other Votann on our side of the battlefield, it stays in the mode where it takes 33% less damage for the rest of the battle. The passive is the meat and bones for this character. When Ammuk moves into range, you can see the debuff applied to all enemy units within 2 hexes. They all get this red icon, with a slight variation depending on whether or not they've moved in the last turn. If they haven't, then you get the melee icon that suggests they take more melee damage, and similarly a unique icon for range damage. Honestly, it's pretty nice and better UI than I was expecting when compared to other debuff icons we've had in the past. The passive applies to Votann as well as mechanical units. In this clip, you can see how the damage preview for Tangira changes after Ammuk moves into area of effect. We mentioned Eldyron earlier, so it's worth noting that Eldyron's Doom effect impacts enemies specifically at 2 hexes, while Ammuk is everyone within 2 hexes of him. Ammuk's passive, at least in terms of scope of effect, is therefore better. We'll come back to the passive in the analysis section later in the video. Unlike the other Votann, Ammuk does not release with a relic. It appears that the way forward in terms of new relic acquisition seems to be a combination of home screen events, campaign events, and the Rogue Trader shop. While we bring up relics, I thought it would be prudent just to remind people of this slide to highlight the characters who already have unique and shared relics in the game. Ammuk's Mythic Missions are listed on screen. I don't think any are particularly challenging. The trickier ones revolve around the Steeljack, and I think you'll probably get there using Actus and or Tangira to trigger the summon to attack again, and then adding in characters like Vitruvius as necessary. It's fairly clear that Ammuk is designed to be a buffer, on a faction level for things like PvP or perhaps faction wars, and on a raid level he is a mech buffer. If you haven't caught my detailed video guide on the raid meta team for 2026, I'm plugging it here, but the short story is that the mech team, while good, is no longer top dog. Don't get me wrong, they're still a really powerful team, but this graph that I did as part of that video hopefully illustrates that they aren't as omnipotent as before. They're probably just a step down from the so-called big hit team. Sadly, or perhaps not sadly depending on your perspective, Ammuk does not bring the mech team back into contention. His buff is on the same scale as Eldyron's, but is a lot more conditional, and we tend to live in a world now where bosses move around quite a lot, making Ammuk relatively more difficult to tie together with Exeter Row. I could wax lyrical and talk numbers, but the vast majority of you just want to see the output, so here on screen I'm showing a run against a legendary 2 Screamer with Ammuk at A1 and abilities at 55. The Screamer is the absolute best boss for Ammuk, since once you start, he doesn't move at all. The run ends at about 2.2 million. On the other side of the screen, the big hit team tries the same thing, but with Asoth. We get a similar total at around 2.23 million. We can see that even best case scenario, Ammuk isn't reinventing the wheel for the mech team, and hopefully these replays help to establish that Ammuk isn't a new piece of the mech puzzle that meta chasers need to focus on and build. It is, however, nice to provide characters that newer players can unlock and level up, in case they missed the boat with some of the older meta options for the mech team. The team isn't the best, but it's perfectly serviceable, and probably more accessible than the big hit team, especially with the Actus event coming up later this patch. Giving Ammuk a powerful relic could of course add a new dimension to his use, but that will be a long time away for most players. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at his performance by trait in LRE. Ammuk has physical damage, mechanical, and satisfies the maximum one-hit category. For physical damage, although he brings a summon to the battle, he doesn't rank highly when compared to other options available, especially when we think about Tangira and the Orcs if you're able to give them the Super Cyborg Body relic. I've put him in the OK tier. Mechanical is a stacked category already, and mechanicals often have great synergy that incentivize you to bring them alongside one another. For example, you can bring summoners like Tangira with healers. Ammuk's kit providing more damage isn't super useful for this game mode. Finally, one hit. Again, there is a plethora of better options here, and I think damage buffing, which is Ammuk's main role, doesn't make him super valuable in LRE. For my infographic, I haven't listed the cutoffs for ability thresholds here since you can get those fairly easily on any Tacticus website. On screen is the character summary in my usual style. Thanks once more to Tawan, Tacticus Ambassador and friend, for his help here. I'll leave this on screen for a second for you to digest. We can conclude by assessing Ammuk's usability. Let's start with Horde modes. As we've already talked about, bringing one summon isn't enough to make him super useful, and the damage buff, I think, isn't going to be amazing for your team. I wonder if he might be okay if you have a lot of summons on your side, but at that point he is probably just a luxury. I've given him a 2 here. What about War? To be honest, I'm skeptical as to how good he is going to be within a mech team or a Votann team. The conditional nature of his passive means you need to be really good at predicting and anticipating in order to do well. I'm also skeptical in general of the Votann with their base movement speed of 2 and the fact that they seem to be better in melee. Therefore, in order for you to get the buff in PvP, you need an enemy that doesn't move, which doesn't seem to occur very often. I've given him a 2 here as well. Finally, Raid. Well, this is his niche, I think. He is an Eldyron level buff for one of the meta teams in the game, but requires a bit more skill and boss understanding to maximize. I've given him a 3.5 here, but could see that move up or down by half a point. Perhaps he'll get better as we see the rest of the faction, but these are fairly middling scores for now. I'll maybe sign off there. I hope that was useful and you enjoy playing with Ammuk. Thanks as always to my Patreons and YouTube members for their support, and bye for now.